You might have heard about an infamous surgery with a 300% mortality rate. The doctor was so careless that he managed to kill the patient, a nurse, and somehow even a bystander. But that operation was but one chapter in the legend of famed 19th century surgeon Robert Liston, who approached amputations the same way a contestant on Chopped approaches a yellow onion. Let's dig in. There are certain statements that we're all unequivocally on board with, like the invention of toilet paper was a solid day for humanity, and the internet was a mistake. Here's another. Having an amputation before the invention of anesthesia wasn't super chill. You see, before we dig into Liston, who was kind of the original video game speedrunner, if life or death surgeries were the Green Hill Zone from Sonic, we first have to understand the terrible nature of surgery in his time. If you were getting your ass operated on back in the day, your ass was usually going to be awake and feeling it. Every single surgery had the potential to be a goddamn Saw movie. What's worse is that amputations were super hot at the time. Broken finger? The whole thing's gotta go. Stub your toe? Say goodbye to that foot. Oh, and you got a cavity. Goodbye. Doctors were handing out scripts for choppings like candy. And in an era when the only way to slightly minimize pain and maximize survival chances was speed, that meant Liston was the guy to call. Robert Liston was a human slap chop for humans. He was dubbed the fastest knife in the West End, and his ability to perform amputations at blinding speeds made him the most sought-after surgeon in all of 19th century London. Operating out of London's University College Hospital, Liston only lost about 1 out of every 10 patients, while his competitors at a nearby hospital lost about 1 in 4. The reason? The guy was fast. He'd been able to get his leg amputations down to about the 2-minute mark. That's right, in the amount of time it takes for your office coffee machine to spin up. Robert Liston could have turned you into Lieutenant Dan. And as the story goes, shouting his catchphrase, "Time me, gentlemen," was just one of the many showy aspects of his surgical methods. Liston wasn't just known to set a timer before pulling out the saw, but he would even place his bloody knife between his teeth to free up his hands. His reputation for being both the fastest and the most daring surgeon made him the toast of the town. And then, ultimately, in a cracked video. So, way to go, Bob. Liston eventually got his leg amputations down to the sub-30-second range. Before your microwave popcorn even starts popping, Liston's popped off your damn leg. And here's where we start talking about what exactly can go wrong when your surgeon is essentially a human blender. First, we have the time he accidentally chopped off some guy's balls in the middle of one of his express leg amputations. There's a lot to unpack there. For one thing, how do you break that news? But Liston's most famous case was the whole 300% mortality rate one. Now here's the scene. There's some guy on the table, and he's screaming because he's awake and he's about to get his leg cut off. So Liston's cutting into the man's leg and everything's on course, except in his hurry, Liston also cuts into his assistant's fingers. And by into, I mean off, because Liston's gonna do what Liston does. He doesn't do little cuts, he chops until the chopping is done. So here's Liston, lopping off his assistant's fingers, but continuing with the job and taking the actual patient's leg off in the process. We've now got a legless man and a fingerless man. They've also both now got gangrene, because this was a bad time to be alive, and both those guys end up dying a few days later. But I know, if you're following, we're only at 200% mortality, and you were promised 300. So here you go. In the middle of his slicing and dicing frenzy, Liston also caught an older spectator's coat and cut through it. Though the man himself wasn't hurt, he was now covered in blood, because these old-time surgeries looked like Pinhead getting to run Nickelodeon Studios for a day. Thinking he'd been slashed open because he was covered in blood and this insane doctor was whipping blades around as if he'd just hit his limit break, the old man panicked, fell to the floor, had a heart attack, and died. 300% mortality, just as promised. Still, the guy was pretty amazing. Though it can be hard to separate Liston the man from Liston the myth, he undoubtedly played a major hand in the world of removing feet. Liston was even around to eventually perform the first surgery with anesthesia, a moment that must have been complicated for him, where it was either the greatest day of his life, or he felt like a wide receiver when the NFL killed team celebrations in the early 2000s. Because folks like Robert Liston chopped people up when they were completely awake, today's doctors can scroll through Instagram with one hand, while they remove your 45-pound genital tumor with the other. All while you're completely numb and watching Hitch on the operating room TV.
Call me Hitch.
Hey, if you enjoyed this video, go ahead and like it, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell for notifications. And if you didn't like this video, that's on me.